On due gratitude, invisible becomes visible by Komal Pande, Deputy Curator, National Museum, New Delhi. The event is organized in conjunction with the ongoing in-house curated exhibition, NANDALAL BOSE, HARIPURA PANELS. To introduce our speaker, Komal Pande is a Deputy Curator and in charge of Numismatics and Epigraphy Department and the Jewelry Collection at the National Museum, New Delhi. She is a course faculty at Indian Institute of Heritage, formerly known as National Museum Institute. Pande is trained in art history and aesthetics from MS University, Baroda, Gujarat, and School of Arts and Aesthetics, JNU, New Delhi, India. She was invited on the visiting program fellowship by Agency of Culture and Palaces, Denmark, to study the Danish silver collection at the Museum Clothing, Denmark in 2022. Pande is a recipient of Charles Walls India Trust Fellowship and has worked as a research fellow in Visual Arts Department at the British Library, London, 2019. She is a panelist author for the Indian Art School textbook titled An Introduction to Indian Art Part 2, 2020, published by NCERT, Government of India. Pande was invited to design department of Southern University of Denmark, Kolding, Denmark in 2022, the Museum of Islamic Arts, Doha, Qatar in 2019, Culture Legacy Program, Tarmiz, Uzbekistan in 2019, Royal Aesthetic Society, Hong Kong 2018, to present her discourse on National Museum India collection. As a curator and art educator, she has delivered presentations, developed pedagogy, and conducted courses on art appreciation, art history, and curation that have been hosted by premier government institutions in India. She is a member of design team for the projects at the Reserve Bank of India, Mumbai, India. She has been involved with giving curatorial walkthrough to international dignitaries and state guests at the G20 exhibition, Roots and Routes at NGMA. Recently, at the occasion of inaugural of the World Heritage Committee held in Bharat Mandapam, New Delhi, she was deputed to give a curatorial walkthrough to the Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, accompanied with DG UNESCO. Pande has recently curated a special exhibition at National Museum, New Delhi, titled Hiranmaya, Gold Ornaments from Takshashila, that is generating good reviews from the visitors. She has also conceptualized and authored an exhibition booklet from this exhibition. Pande was one of the lead curators for international exhibition Silver Treasures of India and Denmark and has co-authored the catalogue with Danish counterparts. She conducted a certificate course on practical and pedagogy approach on curation, collaboration and curation in museum spaces organized by National Museum. She also co-curated the landmark exhibition Jewels of India, the Nizam's jewelry collection, and authored the portfolio essay. Pande has co-curated several other exhibitions, including the saga of modern seals, narrating the lesser-known history, India-Uzbekistan, dialogue of culture, and many others that were showcased at the National Museum, India. Pande was nominated as the assistant editor for the 10th National Museum Bulletin 2018. I welcome Komal Pande for this evening to be here from New Delhi joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all of you, for coming here. And it's always nice to speak in new audiences and get a feedback on whether I'm going on the right track in my academic trajectory or not. Having said that, I want to thank my Director General, National Museum, for allowing this. And this would really not have been there if Priyanka Madam was not visiting New Delhi for a state conclave, for a conclave where we met, and she readily accepted something that I was trying to pitch. So it's all by chance that it has happened. I am not going to talk in a very formal academic manner. I have kept my talk as a free flow of visuals where we all can see things from the National Museum collection in case you haven't visited. And of course, I'm sure you would have seen this beautiful exhibition that's up here. Big congratulations to NGMA for doing this. And Darshan, who was introducing me, and Amrita, both of them, if I may say informally, they are my seniors from college. So I'm very happy to be here. Also, Subarna sir, who is in NGMA, he's done miles of work to get me here physically. Thank you so much for that. And there are more thanks that go unnoticed. So let me begin with this due gratitude, and if more names come in, I will thank them as well. Sorry, I need to get the... So we must have already, most of us have seen the exhibition that's on here. And I thought what better way to talk about Nandalal Bose than to look at how Nandalal Bose is spoken to of or taught to school children in class 12th. And this is how we introduce him. We talk about the colors he uses, the subjects he makes, and how at a time when the idea of modernism in Indian painting was being introduced, he was somebody who looked at commoners, he was somebody who looked at the folk practices of doing the visual art. He looked at bold sketches and drawings and bright colors that people could use. So what we are doing today is that generally, when we enter a museum space, we look at the deities that are there. We look at the royals that are there. We look at, if it is okay to say, mostly the upper strata of the society. And generally, what's on the periphery, what's on the side, the person who made it, the people who were involved in the labor, the people who were actually toiling to make that art, that architecture possible, miss our discussion and discourse every time we talk about art. So what I try to do here is that I just look at the art again, things that we have seen printed in books and catalogs in the museums, at places, just shifting the gaze a little bit. And now trying to see that whether in the margins, whether in the side corners, whether somewhere there is a hint and inkling of the person who would have toiled to make this. Now, I don't think I have to read much, but the kind of comparison that we'll be seeing in today's presentation is what we see here. We have Nandalal Bose's poster of tilling of the soil, and we have down there, which is 2000 BC, almost a Daimabad bronze that comes roughly from later Indus period. And again, these sort of visual comparisons that are going to be there in the later part. So what we'll actually look at today is from 2500 BC till the 19th century, the artworks that reflect the artists, artisan, craftsmen, and people who generally we forget whenever we do our art talks. So unfortunately, they keep pendulating between dismissal and dignity of whether they exist or they don't, whether they are paid or not, whether they are remembered or not. And so the first section of the talk I call the visual resemblance. And as a curator, this is the first thing that we do. We look at two artworks, we see what they look like formally, and then we try to make sense of it. So a lot of this presentation is also working notes that I work with. So the first thing will be how visually things match. So for example, if you've seen the exhibition, there is a very beautiful, and I wanted to start with this, where you have mother who's mothering, if I may use the word, and a kind of labor that really goes unnoticed. It starts from home, and it's a good point and place to remember it and to register it and acknowledge it further. Now you have the mother bathing the child, and interestingly, you have the same thing that was made 5,000 years ago in the plastic arts, where you have mother bathing the child. So it was thought of, it was seen enough to have been reproduced in the plastic arts. Might have gone unnoticed, but due gratitude, that's why we call the talk so. Yeah, pretty similar frames. The subject is same. Of course, the time distance is too much, difference is too much. Now, the second thing I wanted to start with is that how in India we talk about musical traditions, but people who were actually involved with making of the music in the folk systems are generally missed out and not remembered so much. So we have these selected 3 percussion instruments that are there from Nandalal Bose's posters. You have very peculiar styles of instruments that are there. And we have this from the National Museum collection. This presentation is like, how NGMA and NM are soulmates, although distanced in time, because the collection has the same sort of resonance. If you actually look closely, and there's not much written because the visuals are speaking, especially the first one. If you look at the style of the drumming the percussionist is doing, and you compare it to the Gupta period sculpture that is doing the same. And probably, I don't know, because one of the hands is broken, if probably later period works could be used to understand the broken parts of the ancient sculptures, this can be a tool and aid. So we have these. Exact, it's like a carbon copy that's there. And then we have musicians that would sort of ornate and decorate the court with their oral traditions of music and playing. And we have these from the Nandalal Bose's collection. And then we have the sculptural representation of the court dancers that would have sung and danced in the glory of either the king or the deity at festivals and presentations. Yes, so that, and this one is 2nd century BC, so it's actually 200 years before Christ, and this is 1937 that we are looking at. Because the feel and the whole thing is so similar that there will be points where I'll be pinching you to look at the timeline and the difference and the renderings that are happening. Here, this is a much later thing from the National Museum, which is of the 19th century, that shows people who would work in the coin mints in order to make the coin. And we have a similar similar style that's there, where we see smith who's trying to make shape out of iron. Now, after having gone through the first phase of how curators work, we work with visual resemblance, the second aspect is that visual is not enough. If visual was enough, there wouldn't have been art discourses and art theories and art philosophy and aesthetics and so on and so forth. So, of course, there is something more that we need to push for. And the second part of my presentation, I call Beyond the Visual, where we try and look at how the extended meanings function, how do they live, how are they transferred, how do they amplify, and so on and so forth. Not reading the whole text, but right into the image. Here we have a mother who's breastfeeding the child, and this is 5,000 years old in India. We see the same in Nandalal Bose's posters. Till this time, it would have been a visual similarity, but we are pushing a little more, and we are looking at what UNICEF and WHO talks about, much, much later when what they do with their posters, because we have done this in our plastic art 5,000 years ago, and it's reoccurred in NANDALAL Bose's posters, so it is quite a prominent thing. And then what's interesting is that how visual, which is, I don't know if I have a photo, no. So how a visual which is like this, 5,000 years ago, becomes a logo. So it's also the journey, the concept, and the journey that a visual takes from being an expression, a thought, a concept, and finally, that's understood. We go to the malls now and we see a logo like this, and it's understood that it's for that. And we were perhaps promoting this in India 5,000 years ago with our plastic arts. I am in Karnataka, so I have to pay the homage to the land. I thought, let me shift a little bit of, digression from what the museums hold to what the sites can hold. You have a very important site called Badami, which is actually 6th to 8th century. And since now we are looking at what happens beyond the visuals, one was how concept can turn into an image and a logo. And here what we see, this is an image of Krishna lifting the Govardhan. And what art historians actually do, let me take you into that a bit. And mostly this would be understood as Krishna lifting the Govardhan because he is in the center, iconometrically, he's bigger, he's larger. That's what people would worship. But if you look closely, what you see at the back is you see people churning the butter. I have tried to zoom in. It's not in the best of the conditions, but of course we can make out that the churning of the butter is going on. And how art historians actually read the visuals is fascinating. Now there was this whole thing of, we know that Krishna lifted the Govardhan Parvat for quite many days, but we don't know how many days. We don't know whether any artist attempted to show those number of particular days, like, third day of holding the mountain, fifth day of holding the mountain, so on and so forth. But as soon as you see people churning of the butter cannot happen immediately. The milk has to be brought. It has to be turned into curd. From the curd, the butter will come. So it's almost 3 to 4 days. So a lot of times, art historians would look at images and activities that are going on in the periphery to understand how time has been shown by the Indian artists just by chiseling on the rocks and stones. So the third day or the fourth day, and there is actually an art historian, big stalwart, Shri Shivram Murthy, Dr. Shivram Murthy, who reads it. So it's not my reading, but it's come to us in Legacy of Art History. So you have this where he says that this is perhaps the third or the fourth day that this is happening. And then there is there is much more discourse that goes on around this, because you talk about how there were women who understood economics perhaps better than men, if I can say, because they knew that if their husbands as milkmen are doing the job of milking the cows, how could they increase the shelf life of the milk? Because it would go bad very soon. So one way was to make it into curd, it would sustain for longer, and you make it for butter, even longer. You turn it into ghee, even longer. As the shelf life increases, the price would increase. But that's for another talk someday, where I talk about this, how these little bit of, evidences you find in how women were taking forth the economy and not really registered much anywhere. Okay, so we have this from NANDALAL Bose's poster collection, where you have milking as well as the churning going on. And so it's not really about the visual, but how you see the extended meaning of that visual. Now, the third thing is that when we talk about labor, skill, profession, and we look at the ancient arts, I pulled up this example because this is an example I have worked with in the National Museum. So back to the museum now. This is the example that I have worked with at the National Museum, where, when you start understanding the skill, profession, and the work, the toiling that's going on, and you decide to register that object as per the profession. Now, what we have here is from Maharashtra, this yaksha figure called the Pitalkhora yaksha, because it comes from that site, and again 2nd century BCE. So something very interesting happens, that an artwork is generally in its context. It's decontextualized as soon as it's brought to the museum, and the job of the curator then becomes to recontextualize in order to do some justice to, the fact that it's been brought there. And what we have here, so let me just take you to Maharashtra for a quick tour. So you have the rock cut caves that are there, and it is at cave number 3, which is here, the longish cave that you see. It was outside in the debris that this particular yaksha was found. And this is what the caves look like from outside, and this is from the ASI collection, the photograph when they were documenting it. And this is how they photographed it, they understood it, and then it was finally brought to the National Museum. And considering that it's a very prime piece, because it looked very fine and it was from Maharashtra, Pitalkhora is one of the most intriguing, interesting sites to look at. It was placed near the reception area of the National Museum, so that before and while people would buy the tickets, people would be admiring this yaksha figure. And then coming back to the topic that we are discussing today, something happened that we started, it was noticed that it has this inscription, and people had at ASI had already noticed it. Dr. M.N. Deshpande is the one who found this particular artifact from there. So when you read the inscription, it says Kannadasen Hirankarin Kato, which means Kannadas, who is a goldsmith, has carved this sculpture. So as soon as you read this, it, dips you into this ocean of what all was happening professionally in this country 200 years before Christ, where people were not only so proficient that they could put their names with what they were doing, but also they were interdisciplinary. So someone who was carving, who was working on some soft metal like gold, was also doing work on granite, on hard stones like this, and proudly proclaiming it, that, and confessing that, this is my confession, this is my work, this is my profession, and things like that. So we read this, reread this inscription, and with the help of my Director General, who's also an archaeologist, we decided that the most suitable place for this particular sculpture would be the Jewelry Gallery at the National Museum, because it would be the perfect ode for the goldsmiths. For us to have known the name of a goldsmith from 200 years, like 2nd century BCE, is a very, very big finding. So this is how sometimes when we register the skill, when we register the professions, the laborious work that's made that piece, it helps us to curate better in the museum spaces. Now, just for the visual trigger and pleasure of it, I think it will be nice if I can take you through like a phase-wise period of how these little things at places show people working and toiling and doing their profession and skill in sweat and blood. So very quickly, you have the tiller of the soil, writer, chowri bearer, carpenter, and a gardener from the NGMA collection. And back to the farmer that I was talking about. I have put a question mark because it's always a debate whether we call it a farmer or not. People are head over heels that it is not a farmer. Some people say it is. But going by the visual that we are able to see, I think it's a safe reading for now. This is again from 2500 BC. Our registers call it toy cart, but I thought to go with cart puller because That's what we are talking about today, of people engaged in their hardships and works. So you have this. Then we have stone carvers who are making stone carvers on stone. You see the chiseling work going on. So interestingly, this piece would otherwise be read for the central panel that's there, which shows a gold ornament in the center. But if we just shift the gaze a little bit, we are also able to see things like that. And then there are people who try to read the whole thing of how we say that people were at some point in time wearing leaves as apparels, and you see that very much happening here. They are clothed in leaves. This is the departure of Buddha when he decides to leave his house and go on this journey of enlightenment. And when he leaves, his charioteer is shown, who we forget to remember so many times. Had he refused his job that day, we don't know if we would have had this. So we have his charioteer who's depicted there along with the horse. We have this maladhars, the garland bearers who are there, who are, busy in hardships of, these heavy garlands that they would take during the temple professions, during the temple cart processions, etc. So we have this. I love the smile in this figure. For some reason, I think this is one image to show what happens when you enjoy your work, no matter what you do. Yes, so this panel is a very extensive panel, and it's generally studied to understand how, when Buddha was born, how did the saint Asit came, and he said that either he'll denounce the world or he's going to rule the world and things like that. So there's a whole narrative thing that's going on, and generally, art historically, what we would do is that we would, yes. So generally what we would do with an image like this would be that, art history-wise, I would say that, okay, this is a phase where Buddha is not shown in his human form and symbols are used to depict him. And you have him being born here, so he's shown with footprints. That is this. Sorry, I touched something. Yeah. He's shown with the footprints. And here he's being brought to the sage, to say that what will he be? In here, he is shown with 7 footsteps, the first steps that Buddha took. Here, he's shown being born. And so the panel would start like this, and then like this. So this is king who's seated, and Buddha's mother, Maya Devi, sees a dream. She sees a white elephant entering her womb, and she tells it to the king. I don't know if you can see here. She tells it to him, and then king calls the fortune tellers to interpret what the dream would have been. Then on the way to her mother's house, Buddha is born. That's how it would be shown. Since he's not shown in human form, he's shown by 7 steps that he took. Then he's brought to the yaksha, and then he's presented to Asit. But, when you start noticing the peripheries, you notice these interesting 2-3 figures. One is a scribe. That is the earliest depiction of a court scribe who would in the court. You have that. And you also have a chauri bearer, the fly whisk bearer that we saw earlier. Now, this is a very, very fascinating page. This is from Babarnama that was painted during Akbar's period. And Akbar got it made in memory of his loving grandfather. And we talk about Charbagh and Mughal gardens time and again. But we were surprised to find that they actually showed a gardener who's making the garden come alive. So you have the gardener there who's working. And I often like to compare this slide to the ASHA workers that are there today that help in labor with the women. So you have depiction of birth of a baby where you see the baby that's been put in the forefront, and then you have the mother and the female attendant who comes to assist. Carpenter, because we saw these earlier in the slide where I had put Nandalal Bose's work. So with all their tools, etc., they have been put there, and then the artist. Now, moving on to the next segment, where I talk about not only were people represented or thought of in that sense, but some commoners, I also call it presence of people, that's important for any form of art, that some commoners have been responsible for some of the greatest discoveries of history that have happened, because it's got the historical items were buried under the earth and they were found by chance. And one such discovery is there at the National Museum, where we have this Bayana pot, which is from Rajasthan, and these were the cowherds of a small village called Hullanpur, and they were playing, and they stumbled upon this pot that was filled with gold coins, and they were all Gupta gold coins. Had they not found it, or had they not found and reported it, we would not have had this chapter in our history where we talk about varieties of Gupta coins that were struck in 4th century. And so I thought of bringing this pot from the National Museum and putting it together with the shepherds of Nandalal Bose. And the last segment, I hope I'm on time, the last segment that I deal with is how there have been moments where a laborious work has, or an elaborate process has ignited some sort of philosophies that have really changed the way we look at philosophy, because for a lot of time people thought that philosophy is about understanding mystical things and supernatural things and metaphysics, until we had some philosophers who brought the whole gamut of philosophy on the ground, and they started talking about social emancipation through human rights and things like that. So when we talk about this, we look at their choice of vocabulary, how they are sometimes talking about the lengthy process that they got involved in, and how they completely jolted the whole system altogether with their works. Now, I've gone a little far with these two slides, where we have a person who's spinning the wool, and we have a potter, but you cannot miss Kabir's poetry when you talk about potters, people working with the mud, because he talks about that, the God is the one who's the mud also, he's the potter also, he's the vessel also, he's everything, and he's the one who's buying it, he's the one who's selling it. So there is a lot of reference of pottery that comes in his poetry. Of course, spinning of the wool is because we all know that he was into textile. He was an handloom, if I may use the word, artist, worker himself. And his very famous composition of Jini Chadariya, we were in fact having a debate once that there are people who believe that this is not his composition, could have been a later edition. And then some of us were trying to argue that the way he's talking about the process, this cannot be someone who has never touched a handloom ever, because he's talking about how first there is fabric, then the fabric goes to a dyer to get dyed, then it comes back from there, then how people use it. He's also using metaphorical analysis for a lot of these things, but for once, if we do not consider the metaphysics within, but just the fact that there is poetry that talks about the process of making of art and how it enables philosophy altogether. And we have this from the National Museum collection, where you have Kabir and Ravidas sitting together. You can see him working on his loom. And the poster image for today's program was of the cobbler, because this exactly relates to Ravidas, how he worked with leather day and night, and there was so-called, it was considered to be a lowly profession, but he never shied away from quoting his own profession in his work and poetry. And he fought for everyone else who he represented from that section of the society, and how he talks about that he mentions castes and he disregards it totally. And a very, because he talks about his labor with the leather. Now, these are the sources I used. If anyone is interested, I thought there will be more students, but everyone is a professional mostly in this gathering. Yes, and yeah, thank you so much. I hope I didn't take much time, and yeah, did I? No? Okay. Thank you, yes. Now we have some time if there is any back and forth and dialogue. I don't think there will be questions as such, but anything that you want to express about the talk, I would. Yes, please, sir.
The one you showed about the, I think it's 2,500 BC. I don't remember the exact date. No, 500 before Christ, you said. It was, what is the script? And
Oh,
what
thank you,
what
yes.
was the language?
Yes, so the
script and the language.
The script is Brahmi, in which it is written. The language is Kannadasen Hirankaren Kato, which is Pali and Prakrit. So not Sanskrit per se.
Pali and Sanskrit.
Pali Prakrit.
Pali and Prakrit.
Yes.
Combination.
Combination, we can say, yes, because Pali and Prakrit would be based on the regional findings also and where the person would come from, but it's certainly not Sanskrit. Because
and the script?
Brahmi. So there were two scripts that were practiced. There was Kharoshti and there was Brahmi. So this is Brahmi, in which we find Ashokan inscriptions also, most of them. Yes.
Thank you for the interesting talk. I had a question which I wanted your comments on. So going back to Nandalal Bose's depiction of the working class labor community, I'm just thinking, say, if we juxtapose this with the colonial paintings of the same, which is more of a colonial ethnographic project of the colonial paintings rendering working class labor, mundane lives of the British Raj back then. If we have to place this next to each other, and from how would you see contrasts or similarities in the depiction of the same working class community from more like an etic perspective? How would they both differ from each other, or are there any commonalities?
So that, I think, would be majorly, how would I see, I mean, there would be variety of angles to look at it. One is, of course, we talk about the colonial gaze time and again, that how our professions were looked at by them. But also one should not dismiss the work that has happened during the colonial period, because that informs us of so many things that we miss to document because they were part of our lives. But if I just see them visually, I think the basic difference that would be in any folk composition and a classical composition, like if I may use the example of Kabir, how a Sufi singer would sing Kabir and how a Dhurpat singer would sing Kabir. You know, the subject would remain the same. It's just the rendering would, because their audiences were different, the renderings would change. That would be a more fine and more naturalistic depiction, while this is more of the celebration of the spirit in some sense. Does that answer? Yes. Yes, sir. जी सर.
तो मतलब हम लोग अपने इतिहास में देखते हैं कि इस तरह के दरबार में जो कुछ हुआ वो कहीं पे भी है नहीं. हम अगर जानना चाहते क्या हुआ तो ह्यूएन सांग आए और उन्होंने देखा, और कोई और आए उन्होंने देखा, उनकी तो लिखावट है. हमारे दरबारों में जो हुआ या जो इन सब राजाओं के वहाँ हुआ वो कहाँ गया सब? और कहीं है कि नहीं?
हाँ, तो इसमें से कुछ है सर, कुछ राजा ऐसे हुए जिन्होंने पत्थरों पर अभिलेख लिखवाए, वो अभिलेख हमें मिलते हैं, जैसे कि सम्राट अशोक के अभिलेख वो मिलते हैं। उसके अलावा ताम्रपत्र पर अभिलेख लिखे गए, हाँ, सो वी डू हैव कॉपर प्लेट्स in many of the Indian museums also, many of the museums abroad also, they have Indian copper plates. So generally वो ताम्रपत्र पे लिख के उसमें हमें कई बार किंग का सिग्नेचर भी मिलता है देखने को, but that's not as early as this work of art. But this work definitely tells us that people were there in the court to do the scribing. They are the stenographers of the kings. Yes. Yes, yes. It's mostly in form of copper plates and stone and brick inscriptions.
First of all, thank you. I mean, the way you have curated also, you just gave us an insight how you curate also. That was very nice of you
Thank
about
you.
it. And second thing, I just look at the whole, the talk revolves on Gandhiji and why did he call about it. It strongly demonstrates the cottage industries. That's one thing I noticed. The other one is the cart puller, something you had that one. For me, I didn't feel like it is a cart puller. I mean, my interpretation.
Yeah.
It looks like he's on a cannon. His body language shows that he is a victor.
Can we can go back and see it?
This
This
yeah,
one?
This one, yeah. Look at the body language. The right hand posing at this, and on the left hand on the left knee. It only
Okay.
shows that he's a victor thing. And
Okay.
even the where his legs is resting, you can find that it looks like a cannon. And the body of it is also looks like a cannon portion of it. That was my observation. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may respond to that. So this is from the Indus Valley civilization. I think the only civilization across the world where we have not found any weapons. So there is no arms and armory found from the Indus Valley civilization. So cannon is a big thing to claim here, although it's nice to have these various interpretation of the visual, because probably you are looking at the stance with which he's seated on it. But this could have been some sort of a chariot model, perhaps, because the royals would be the charioters. The royals would have a charioteer who would be high in command sometimes while they would be moving. And we have found chariots of Indus Valley civilization even recently from an excavation at Sanoli. That has happened. So if there was war, they were, I shouldn't be saying this on camera, but they wouldn't have been able to come with those war strategies back. They would have thought of other means and methods. Yeah. Yeah, yes.
Since you are on the topic, can you educate us as to where the understanding of the Harappan Valley or Sindhu Valley civilization language is from? Where does it stand today?
I wish I had some good news on that front, but the language, there is a script. There are scholars who are working on it, no doubt. There are projects that the government is also trying to seek on reading of these, but we do not have for sure certain ideas. So actually language decoding is a very interesting thing altogether. So we would not have been able to read Brahmi and Kharoshti also. We read it because there was an Englishman called James Prinsep who found some of the coins, Indo-Greek coins, that had the Greco-Roman as well as Kharoshti on them. So he used them to make a chart and decode the whole thing altogether. Because there were bilingual things, the language could be decoded. The whole story of Brahmi is very interesting because this was a language that nobody could read. And Firoz Shah Tughlaq, one of the Tughlaq rulers, he got very intrigued when he saw it inscribed on the pillar for the first time. And then he called upon a lot of people to read it, and nobody could read it because it was forgotten. Until James Prinsep comes and he reads it in 1800s, and he makes these charts for reading Kharoshti and Brahmi. Unfortunately, as of yet, we haven't found any bilingual inscription from Indus which will aid the reading of it. Yes, sir.
The venue where it was found, that
Yes.
same thing,
Yes.
where was it?
Pitalkhora,
Where is that?
Maharashtra.
Which part? East, west, north, south?
I have been there, but I cannot. It's not very far from Ajanta. It's, yeah. Aurangabad, yes.
So this,
Yes, yes.
Not many people go to Pitalkhora. Yes, it's not visited.
Yeah.
51 sites, similar sites was it across Pakistan.
It's a beautiful place, very unique sculpture.
Yeah. Very exciting. I mean, it's. Yes, sir.
with the excavations going on now, new things are coming out. Is there any link to the latest excavation of the, I mean, depends on what you name it, the Saraswati and the Indus Valley, or any links to the...
I might not be an expert to speak on that, sir, because I am a curator and I will upset the whole fraternity of archaeologists. If I speak on that, I think it will be best answered by an archaeologist because I am a trained art historian working as a curator, so my job starts when the things are out of the soil in the museum space. So I work with recontextualizing it mostly. And I think few things are best when they are spoken from the specialist's mouth. Otherwise, it just, anyway, we live in a lot of anonymity about what happened, and it'll just be adding more masala to what we don't know. So I refrain, if you allow me, from answering that.
How do you, as a curator, look at color? Because I think that's one point we didn't cover here.
Yes.
Well, not color of the skin, but color of the...
Yes. So when Darshan was, my senior Darshan was introducing me here, he spoke about this exhibition that I had done. I'm just giving you a slight example that I had done with India and Denmark on silver of both the countries. So one of the things I did with color was that because we are mostly, green, agriculture, tropical style of a country, I went with a greenish tone and I went with a Nordic blue for Denmark, and I tried to run one wall of green against one wall of blue where the Danish objects were kept. The second exhibition I did was Takshila, which is still ongoing. That's gold ornaments from Takshashila, Pakistan. So Takshila is known for its stone sculptures, which come under Gandhar style of sculptures, which are schist, dark blackish in color. I went with that in order to pay a homage to the, stone carvers of the city. But then I had put gold in order to, also talk about the goldsmiths that were there. So we use color either conceptually. Mostly I go conceptually, but different curators have different ways of placing. And the exhibition becomes totally different when it is designed by A or B, like that. Yes.
Like now we are moving ahead, virtual museums are taking place in future. So are we thinking about making any virtual digitalized experience of museum and art forms so that we can enjoy the museum sitting at home, and same we can authenticize the experience for everybody?
Yes, so a lot of work is being done in that front. Like if you ever come to the National Museum, we have this whole gallery which we called Virtual Experience of Ajanta, where we have VR glasses to see the whole augmented reality of it. So that's going on, but I would still say that it's better if people come to the museum. I mean, this much effort we should do. It's already been brought from the site till the museum. Now you have to come from your house out to the museum, because most of the museums outside now are talking about visual fatigue already. They want people to experience the strokes. You don't get the feel. Like, I had seen this exhibition online, the Haripura posters. But when I was seeing here the exhibition yesterday, the whole feel was different, because once you are in that space, it does something to you. Unless, and I don't want to disregard what you're saying, because there are things happening, and in New York right now, I can't afford to go. So I need to see it. So both the things have to happen. But what's available and, you know, where we can go, we should manage. I'm just coming with a hidden agenda to push you all to come to the museums. Yes, anyone else? Anything else? No? Okay.
I had not seen the artwork. I just came directly here. But after seeing the way you explain different angles, I'm really inspired, and I got a new way of looking at art.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Yes.
So we have call it a day. So I thank Komal Pande from coming all the way from Delhi, taking a time out, agreeing.
Thank you so much
to
for having
NGMS
me. And thank you
invitation
everyone. You were a lovely audience.
come
Thank you
here.
so much.
And special thanks to our director, ma'am, Priyanka
Yes.
ma'am, because she met her and she said we would want to have it here. I request ma'am to kindly honor our speaker today for being here with us and delivering a wonderful talk, engaging our